Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea proposes a $495 billion budget for 2024, planning the smallest ever on-year increase in almost 2 decades, with a focus on improving the country's fiscal soundness. Regardless of fiscal restraint, South Korea is allocating an all-time high budget for official development assistance next year. That is assistance for other countries to expand its contribution to the international community. North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un denounces South Korea, the US, and Japan, calling the leaders gang bosses. He said that the joint trilateral military exercise agreed upon at the Camp David summit raised tensions on the peninsula. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We start with the Yoon administration's budget proposal for next year. South Korea plans for a smallest ever on-year rise in the budget in almost 2 decades. As it continues to tighten its belt, it focuses on improving fiscal soundness, but also plans to strengthen the country's welfare system. Our business correspondent Shin Ha-young starts us off.
The government's budget proposal for 2024 was revealed following a cabinet meeting on Tuesday. For this year's budget, the Yoon administration focused on building a solid foundation for fiscal soundness. While continuing with this theme for next year's budget as well, it has also focused on improving the country's financial structure.
우리 정부는 경제 체질을 시장 중심 민간 주도로 바꿔 민간이 더 활발하게 투자하고 지출하고 일자리를 만들어내는데 역점을 둘 것입니다. 이를 위해 민간 투자를 저해하는 킬러 규제를 과감하게 철폐하고 민간의 자금이 흘러갈 수 있도록 금융 시스템을 정비할 것입니다.
In order to do so, South Korea will continue to tighten its belt. The government proposed a budget for next year of 656.9 trillion Korean won, or around $495 billion at the current rate. It's an increase of 2.8% from this year's budget, the smallest on-year increase since top-down budgeting was first introduced in 2005. Also, the government has gone through major spending reforms in order to secure an extra $17 billion of funds for use in the budget. The centerpiece of the bill is some $14.6 billion allocated to bolster the welfare system for the socially vulnerable. This includes increasing the maximum basic living allowance for low-income families to approximately $1,400 per month. That's $160 more compared to this year and more than the total increase implemented by the previous administration. As a response to the aging society issue, the government has increased the number of jobs for seniors to 1 million, which is approximately 10% of the elderly population and marks a record high increase of 147,000. It has also increased senior employment allowances by 7%. Those allowances have been frozen since 2018. Tackling the country's low birth rate, parents with newborns will be eligible for up to 1 million won, or around $750 per month, in parental allowance beginning next year. Also, to achieve a balance between work and childcare, the period of paid childcare leave will be extended for the first time since 1995 from 12 months to 18 months. Next year's budget has also been designed to manage the increase in government debt by reducing expenditure growth.
Despite a decline in tax revenue, we mitigated the deterioration of the fiscal balance for the upcoming year by curbing the growth rate of total expenditure. We have also managed to control the increase in national debt, keeping it at its lowest level since 2019 at 61.8 trillion won, as part of efforts to establish a solid foundation for fiscal soundness.
With next year's budget, South Korea's budget deficit to GDP ratio is forecast to be at 1.9%, worsening by 1.3 percentage points from this year. The total national debt to GDP ratio is expected to be 51% next year, up 0.6 percentage points from this year. The government will submit the final bill to the National Assembly on September 1st, and the legal deadline for the National Assembly to pass the budget is December 2nd. 신하영, Arirang News.
Regardless of fiscal restraint, South Korea is allocating an all-time high budget for official development assistance next year. That is assistance for other countries to expand its contribution to the international community. The amount set aside towards reconstruction efforts in Ukraine is to increase more than fivefold. For more, here's our Peunji.
South Korea has tentatively allocated its largest ever budget for official development assistance, or government aid designed to promote the economic development and welfare of other countries. Stressing the country's growing role in the global community, President Yoon said Tuesday that the government plans to raise the ODA budget next year to 6.5 trillion Korean won, or roughly $4.9 billion.
글로벌 중추국가로서 국제사회에 대한 책임 있는 역할과 기여도 확대해야 합니다. 우크라이나 재건 지원 ODA 예산을 5배 이상 확대하고 디지털 분야 ODA를 대폭 늘리겠습니다.
Of the total ODA budget, nearly $400 million will be used to support Ukraine, which is 8 times higher than last year. It will spend $196 million to provide medical supplies, humanitarian aid, and around $98 million for reconstruction projects. And another $98 million will be given to help Ukraine through international agencies. As for next year's defense budget, the country has announced a plan to increase it by 4.5%, focusing on strengthening its capabilities to counter North Korea's nuclear missile threats. The Defense Ministry said Tuesday that it'll submit a budget proposal of about $45 billion to the National Assembly on Friday for approval. It seeks to spend around $13.5 billion to bolster defense capabilities, 5.2% higher compared to the year before. This includes building a combined combat system using both manned and unmanned assets, as well as developing the country's so-called three-axis defense system, a scheme to counter North Korea's nuclear missile threats. The first axis is to preemptively strike North Korea's nuclear missile sites when there are signs of an imminent attack targeting South Korea. If that fails, it moves on to the second axis, intercepting launched missiles using a multi-layered missile defense system. And finally, the third axis, mass retaliation against North Korea following an attack on the south. The ministry also set aside $31 billion to run its military forces, an increase of 5.8% on year. Meanwhile, the government decided to cut next year's budget for the Unification Ministry by more than 20%. Peunji, Arirang News.
At the United Nations, member states including South Korea, the US, and Japan have denounced North Korea's recent attempt to put spy satellite into orbit as it violated UN Security Council resolutions. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
During a meeting of the United Nations Open-Ended Working Group for Space Security held at the UN office in Geneva on Monday, a number of countries, including South Korea, the US, and Japan, condemned North Korea's recent attempt at launching a military reconnaissance satellite. Speaking at the meeting, Park Eun-jin, South Korea's Director of Disarmament and Non-Proliferation at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, said that attempts made by the North to send a military spy satellite using ballistic missile technology are illegal, stressing that Pyongyang is getting closer to achieving its goal of advancing the necessary technology. Japan's representative also slammed the recent launch, saying that it goes against UN Security Council resolutions and poses a serious threat to countries in the region. However, North Korea's permanent representative to the United Nations Secretariat in Geneva, Han Dae-sung, argued that UN Security Council resolutions are illegal documents that violate the UN Charter and that Pyongyang will not be bound by such resolutions led by the United States and its allies. Han continued to argue that other countries have also launched satellites, with South Korea and the U.S. constantly conducting joint military drills. Such launches are self-defense measures directly related to guaranteeing the safety of the country. The U.S. quickly responded by saying that while the joint drills are defensive in nature, the North's ballistic missile launches are not. The UN Open-Ended Working Group for Space Security is a working-level consultative body established by the UN General Assembly to create responsible norms of conduct, and comes after North Korea conducted its second attempt to send a military spy satellite into orbit, which failed last Thursday. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Special forces from South Korea and the United States have been out in the ocean for the past couple of days to master techniques for maritime infiltration. It's among the dozens of field training as part of the ongoing Ulji Freedom Shield exercise. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung takes us there.
Special operations forces from South Korea and the U.S. head toward the shore on rubber boats, keeping their positions low. A number of the Special Forces personnel swim the rest of the way, cautiously making sure it's safe for the rest of the team to arrive. This is a glimpse of the combined training that Seoul and Washington do on a daily basis to infiltrate the enemy's base. Since last week in Yangyang County, Gangwon-do Province, around 100 personnel from South Korea's Army and U.S. Special Operations Command Korea have been conducting field training exercises to enhance skills in maritime infiltration. The training is part of the Ulji Freedom Shield exercise, which runs until Thursday. This combined special operation is aimed at strengthening Seoul and Washington's interoperability.
Combined special operations capabilities could be further strengthened by mastering various tasks with the U.S. Special Operations Command Korea. We will continue to train and establish a perfect readiness so that we can accomplish any mission in case of emergency.
Seoul and Washington Special Forces master maritime infiltration techniques, including special strike operations and close combat techniques. The U.S. Captain Jay said the training is also focused on building the skills of leaders at every level, noting it as being the most important resource. He also underlined strong teamwork with South Korean forces.
For 70 years, American and Korean soldiers have stood shoulder to shoulder, dedicated to the defense of our homelands. Our ironclad alliance is integrated at every level, from the strategic to the tactical. I am proud to work with my Korean brothers. 같이 갑시다, 필승.
Going forward, Seoul and Washington Special Forces vow to prepare for every scenario on air, land, and sea.
U.S. Korea! We are together!
Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un denounces South Korea, the U.S., and Japan, calling the leaders gang bosses. He said that the joint trilateral military exercises agreed upon at the Camp David summit raised tensions on the peninsula. Kim also called the South by its official name, the Republic of Korea, for the first time. Our Lee Dae-hyun explains.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un criticized the leaders of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan for their plans for trilateral joint military drills. According to the regime state-run media on Tuesday, Kim Jong-un marked the Day of Navy by inspecting the naval headquarters near Pyongyang with his daughter. Now, this was the first time that Kim Jong-un has visited the naval headquarters for the Day of Navy since he took power in 2012. In a ceremonial speech there, Kim mentioned the Camp David Trilateral Summit, where Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo pledged to regularize joint military exercises. He also called the Korean Peninsula the, quote, most dangerous zone for nuclear war, citing Washington's deployment of strategic assets in the South. During the speech, Kim referred to South Korea by using the country's full name, the Republic of Korea, for the first time. Kim Yo-jong, the sister of Kim Jong-un, used the full name earlier last month. One expert says this shows the North's stronger stance towards South Korea.
This shows how the North will now consider the South as external relations, not as one people. No flexibility will be applied in Seoul-Pyongyang relations anymore, which is a hard line on Seoul.
One official from South Korea's Unification Ministry assessed this as Pyongyang expressing its sense of crisis amid strengthened security ties between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. The official also said that the North must know that its missile provocations are the cause of the stronger ties, adding that Pyongyang should focus on its public welfare instead of preparing for war. In fact, in international waters south of the Korean Peninsula on Tuesday, South Korea, the U.S., and Japan staged a trilateral missile defense exercise. The Navy said that the exercise focused on mastering the response procedures, which is to detect and track a computer-simulated target and share related information. An inspection of sharing missile warning data in real time between the three nations was also conducted. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk-yeol has told the chairman of the Executive Affairs Authority of Abu Dhabi, Khaldun Khalifa Al Mubarak, that South Korea-UAE ties have grown significantly over the past year. The two met over a luncheon at the Yongsan presidential office on Tuesday, as Chairman al-Mubarak is currently visiting Korea. Although the exact reason for his visit has not been disclosed. Yoon also conveyed hopes for further advanced bilateral relations based on the outcomes of his state visit to UAE in January. Chairman al-Mubarak expressed his desire to deepen the two countries' quote, special strategic partnership, especially in nuclear power, energy, defense, and investment. South Korea's export value index fell year-on-year for the 10th consecutive month in July due to a drop in semiconductor prices. Data released by the Bank of Korea on Tuesday showed the index decreased by 15.8% compared to last year, with more than a 30% drop in semiconductor prices. However, the net terms of trade index has been recovering since June due to a bigger decline in import costs than export prices. Specifically, this was caused by larger base effects from international oil prices in the first half of 2023 compared to a year ago. South Korea will raise the spending limit on holiday gifts for public officials in a bid to boost the domestic economy and business for local producers. Anti-Corruption Commissioner Kim Hong-il says the revision to the country's graft law will take effect from Wednesday, with spending on agricultural and fishery products to rise from 100,000 won to 150,000 won, or around 75 to 110 US dollars. The range of gifts for civil servants up to 50,000 won will expand to include gift certificates for food or cultural products and services, with the exception of vouchers that can be converted into cash. Ahead of the Chuseok Thanksgiving holiday, the limit for agricultural and fishery items will be raised from 200,000 won to 300,000 on agricultural and fishery products, or roughly $150 to $225. The special spending limit will apply from September 5th to October 4th. Earlier today, the ruling People Power Party and the main opposition Democratic Party ended their respective two-day workshops, making resolutions that will hopefully lead them toward accomplishments in the upcoming regular National Assembly sessions, as well as setting themselves up for next year's general election. Our political correspondent Lee Si-hoo reports.
Rival lawmakers of the ruling People Power Party and the main opposition Democratic Party each adopted and publicized new sets of resolutions on Tuesday at the closing of their respective two-day workshops. The PPP representatives who met in the city of Incheon vowed to take three specific actions. They are confronting political provocations while refraining from political strife and prioritizing the livelihood of the public, committing to engage in productive legislative action to foster the country's economic growth, and working together with the government to push for reform in the pension, labor, and education sectors and successfully carrying out national tasks. PPP leader Kim Ki-yeon urged his members to move forward with strong determination, saying that the party was at the starting line of a journey toward victory. The DP gathering in the city of Wonju in Gangwon-do province also made public its resolution containing 8 promises to the people to improve their livelihoods. They included the DP's determination to keep on protesting against the Fukushima wastewater release, protect the general public against violent crimes, and demand thorough investigations of the Jamboree fiasco and the Osong underwater tunnel disaster, as well as to improve the economy. The DP leader Lee Jae-myung said it was necessary to come up with measures for the recovery of people's livelihood while demanding thorough investigations of the Jamboree and tunnel disaster. The workshops come just ahead of the last regular session of the 21st National Assembly prior to next year's general election. The 100-day assembly session is set to begin on September 1st. And this will be some members of the rival party's last chance to push for and pass long-awaited pending bills. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk-yeol declared 3 additional regions as special disaster zones on Tuesday in an effort to swiftly recover from the aftermath of Typhoon Khanun. Gosong-gun County of Gangwon-do Province, part of Gyeongju City, and Chilgok-gun County in Gyeongsangbuk-do Province are now eligible for the government's financial support for recovery work, as well as relief funds for victims and other benefits. Two other regions, Daegu's Gunwi-gun County and a different part of Gosong-gun County, were named as special disaster zones 2 weeks ago. With this new announcement, all of Gosong-gun County is a special disaster zone. The top office says the decision was based on a detailed joint investigation by relevant ministries regarding the typhoon damage. Over in New Zealand, on the back of growing popularity in Korean content worldwide, more locals and second-generation Korean immigrants are trying to learn the Korean language. Our Jong-un reports.
This is a Korean language class open to locals every weekday evening. People of various ages and occupations learn Korean here. Recently, Korean culture such as K-pop and Korean dramas has become popular in New Zealand, increasing interest in learning Korean. The number of applicants also surged this year at the Korean Education Center in New Zealand, which was established in 2012 and mainly provides education for locals. The number of students waiting to get into the Korean course is also increasing, with 286 applying for a course open for 170 people.
Most of what motivates the students is their interest in K-dramas or K-pop. This expands to thinking, I like Korean culture, I want to know more about it. They want an effort to understand Korea is their primary interest.
The recent interest in Korean is not limited to fans of the Korean wave. Interest in Korean classes is also rising within New Zealand's second-generation Korean immigrants. Until now, these people had primarily acquired English to adopt to the local community as immigrants. But with South Korea's position growing larger in the global community, more Koreans are trying to teach their children their native language properly.
Parents didn't send their children to Korean schools at first because they thought learning to speak English was more important. But now that life is more stable and comfortable and South Korea's status has increased, immigrants and the 1.5 generations are more likely to send their children to learn Korean.
My friends sometimes ask me how to say stuff in Korean. That didn't happen often when I was younger because K-pop wasn't very famous back then.
Korean students may also learn about Korean culture and history at the language schools.
The most important reason to learn this is because we're Korean, so it's important not to lose our culture, language, and art.
As demand for learning Korean is increasing, New Zealand's Korean Society is making efforts to expand support for those who want to learn about Korea's history and culture, as well as the Korean language. Jong-un, Arirang News.
Nationwide showers will continue until tomorrow. Heavier showers are expected for the south of the country. For the coastlines of Gyeongsangnam-do Province, severe downpours of up to 200 millimeters are expected. For Jeollanam-do and parts of Gyeongsang-do Province, up to 150 millimeters are in store. Central regions, including here in the Seoul metropolitan area, will see 30 to 80 millimeters. For those across the coastlines, expect violent winds to follow at times. Winds will be gusting as fast as 15 meters per second. Strong winds will also produce high waves across the ocean. Please stay away from water and avoid places near the shorelines. Wet morning will prevail nationwide. Tomorrow, Seoul will be starting off at 22 degrees Celsius. Daytime highs in Seoul will get up to 26, Daejeon 25, Gyeongju and Busan will be reaching 30 degrees. And this coming Sunday, the entire nation will see another round of showers. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
Now that is all for this Tuesday night newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with the most up-to-date news. Good night.